Hey y'all, this is Lori with the CD Pipeline for the CDF. Very happy to be here today. We are going to be talking about conferences, and with us we have an esteemed panel of guests, and I'm going to go ahead and let them introduce themselves, and we're going to go ahead and start with Sarah. So Sarah, what you got going on for us?
Hi, everyone. Sarah McCaslin. I'm Chief Strategy Officer at Modus Create. I'm responsible for all commercial partnerships as well as our open source program office. So really combining the commercial aspect of software with the open source. Thank you, Lori. I'm excited to be here.
Olivier, you're next.
Yeah, awesome. So, my name is Olivier. I'm working as an engineering manager at SUSE. I'm mostly working on things related to Rancher, so all things related to Kubernetes, Kubernetes, which is also a CNCF project, and in the past I used to work on the Jenkins project for a few years at CloudBees.
Jeremy?
Yeah, Jeremy Meese, and I currently work at a company called OneStream, and I've been in the DevOps and cloud native space for quite a while. Spent time at Circle CI for, so that's where it really brought me to CD Foundation work, and yeah, just really excited to be here.
And someone y'all might not know, but does so much work for the CDF behind the scenes and keeps us running is Roxanne. So, Roxanne, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Roxanne Jonka. I work for the CDF since 2020. I've organized all 6 cdCons with these nice folks. I used to work for the Eclipse Foundation, so I've been in open source for a long time. And yeah, I'm excited to be here.
So, if you haven't guessed it, and I'm pretty sure I said it already, the topic of today is conferences. And the group of people we have are an esteemed panel of people that have been working with conferences, going to conferences, attending conferences, submitting at conferences for years. I was fortunate enough to help with cdCon in 2023. I do stuff with the CNCF for KubeCon, and there's a bunch of other conferences that I'm on the program committee for, like Rejects and other things like that. So let's just kick it off. So, if you are thinking about attending a conference, let's start from the attendee angle. What are things that you should look at in making your decision? And Olivier, let's start with you because you're really big with FOSDEM as well as like cdCon. So, from the free community events to the paid events.
So usually the first thing that I look is obviously the content, what will be the topic about. Then I look at also who are the speakers out there, because I know that some people often deliver pretty good presentations. And otherwise, I also try to see if the conference will talk about challenges that I'm facing on a day-to-day basis, basically.
Sarah, what about you?
I think the main thing for me, especially when you're going to one of the larger conferences, is to really prioritize your time. If you're going to a super large event, it's very difficult to get from one talk to the next. And so if there are key things you want to be able to participate in, you really have to map that out, especially if you're in, Las Vegas, London, one of those places where it's multiple halls, or it becomes very disappointing. But the first year I went to a large event, like a reInvent, I ended up missing a lot of what I wanted to see because you just don't build in that buffer of going place to place. And it's really important. And at a conference of that magnitude, you really should try to limit it to 5 to 10 things, and the rest of it view it as a bonus, or you leave feeling a little frustrated by no fault of your own, because it happens to everyone. You have to get through the first one to realize you're not going to see everything you wanted to see.
Jeremy, what about you?
Yeah, I think that I definitely would echo those points. I think the other piece is making sure that, especially if you're going as an attendee, and especially if your company is paying for you to attend, is to really look for those things that not only that you're wanting to learn, but also the things within your team. What is the value that you can bring back, and what are the specific talks that maybe somebody on your team or in your department wants to get some more info on, or they want to learn about, that you can bring back that ROI. I mean, it's not just for certain areas of the company, it's also for things like this. And so I think that's one thing I look at. I think the other thing I'm looking at, not only the speakers, but also like, what are the events that are happening kind of before and after not only the days before, but also the evening events, because the hallway track is an important piece of conferences. Those conversations you get to have that you don't get to have in a talk, because that's generally considered rude if you're talking to people during someone else's talk. But you'll be able to have that conversation and connect with others that are also potentially having some of the same challenges, and that maybe they found something that they could share, or you have something you could contribute. So I'm looking at those opportunities as well, not just the talks, but what are the other things to get involved in and make the most of my time.
And Roxanne, you've been nodding. What do you think?
Yeah, that's what I go to conferences for. I'm less technical, so it's not so much for the talks, but to meet other people and make connections and find who I can collaborate with in the future. And I think once you work from home like I do, you forget people are humans. Like you don't, but when you see them in person, you're like, oh, it's so different.
Right, you're like, oh, you're tall, or like,
Yeah.
wow, you're short, because I'm only
Yeah.
used to seeing you from your shoulders up. Like, that's crazy.
And you
And
get to talk about fun things too, like not just work. Yeah, it's
yeah.
different.
And just to clarify what the hallway track is, because the first time I went to a conference and someone said, "Oh, the hallway track is the best track," I looked for it on the schedule and I didn't understand what people were saying. And that's okay, right? It's okay to not know, but the hallway track is literally the in-between times where you can snag a speaker or snag somebody that you were sitting next to that maybe was nodding or agreeing with you. And to Jeremy's point, that's where you can kind of bring somebody in and have more of a conversation, or then you maybe invite them to lunch and you go to like sit at their lunch table with them. So I think the networking piece of conferences is not something that maybe your boss understands as much as you do when you come back and you tell them all the things that you've learned, because I think that's where real connections are made. Yes, you're learning from the speaker, but then you're connecting, to your point, Roxanne, with an actual human, an
Yeah.
individual, and having those conversations. All right, cool. So that's from an attendee standpoint.
I just want to add from an attendees as well, which is nice, is that it's also nice if you work with specific open source projects, is try to identify who from those open source projects are planning to attend the conference. So usually it's also good. I mean, I do that quite often, where I just try to see who's going there. Maybe I can ask questions directly, because when you know the maintainers, you also have an opportunity to shape the project you work on a regular basis. So it's not only, I mean, conferences like super important from networking perspective.
And I think that's great too, and I think what we've heard from everyone is have a plan when you go in, check out what's going on, check out the speakers, check out the downtime, which is also really important, because you are going to need downtime. And it's really cool when some conferences have like a dog petting section, or a quiet zone, or, to Sarah's point, not just taking the time to get to sessions, but take some time to go back to your room and decompress. I think is something that you also need to think about as an attendee, even a speaker, anyone just going to a conference, is the absolute sensory overload that you're just not used to when you're not used to being around thousands of people at the same time. Even a conference with hundreds of people, it's still a lot to manage in this day and age when most of us either work from home or have very small office settings. So that's exciting. But so let's get to the behind the scenes stuff, right? So all of us have been on program committees before, and the program committee is, I think, probably the toughest job in conferences, because you're the ones that are looking at all of the abstracts that have been submitted and then trying to create the event for people to want to attend. So Jeremy, you were just recently the program committee chair of cdCon, which is coming up in June. Y'all get your tickets. So tell us a little bit about your experience.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I've been a part of multiple program committees across many different conferences, and I think this was actually um, the the first one that I've done that I wasn't running the whole conference, which is so it's a whole other kind of thing. But it was really good. I think the challenge is always not only coming prepared with the things you want to do for that conversation that you're going to have with the rest of the program committee, but also looking at the the different perspectives that each bring, and making sure that uh, everybody has a voice. It's very easy for certain personalities to kind of rise to the top and always have, and it doesn't mean that their input's not valid, but it also means that there's others that you've got to make sure that you're getting. And so when you're getting those reviews, set that, you know, setting the tone of what are you trying to get for the conference, and then making sure everybody has a voice, and making sure to call that out, I think is one thing that I think was really helpful to kind of keep in mind, at least for the cdCon side. I'm really excited to see how it all shaped up. It really came together well.
I mean,
It had
everyone
great
was
participation.
happy that you did that. Yeah, they seemed thankful and they could share their expertise, and also, yeah, everyone got their say.
What about you, Sarah?
So I think I've been part of 2 of the committees now. I think the thing that coming in and I was like, this is going to be amazing. You know, it's really cool. You get a first peek at what people want to be talking about. But I think you need to understand the time commitment, because this isn't a 1 hour thing where you're just brainstorming and talking about how great the conference is going to be. That's not fair to all of the people that have submitted. And so you really have to block off time. For me, it was an entire weekend, because you need to do it in a time frame that you can remember what you're reviewing, right? If you wait 2 weeks between, you lose a lot of the context. And so for me, I took an entire weekend and read through every single one. And then what I found funny though, and how the brain works, is the ones when you're starting, you're very skeptical. By the time you get to the end, you're a little bit more free flow because you kind of have an idea of what's happening. And so what I realized is I have to go back and actually sort these by topic and then reread them again when you're looking at a topic, because otherwise the way they come in and in the order, I don't know how they're ordered or the intention, but you have to prioritize them in a way that's going to work for you, so you can actually compare apples and apples, or it's overwhelming. And so when I started going through, I read through everything roughly before I did any scoring at all. And then I went back through and sorted into the categories. And then I said to myself, what is unique about this? Because if I'm not necessarily that interested as someone reading this, is the audience going to be interested? Or is it's basic, but it's so important that maybe something people are interested in? But I think you have to figure out a way. It's just like your business, what you're doing. You have to figure out a way to have a differentiator in what you're going to talk about that stands out for a committee, because we're reviewing, I mean, the 2 I've been on, there were like 60, 70 submissions, and there's 4 or 5 topics. So you really, really have to figure out how your messaging is going to stand out. And I think we've seen some really, really great, submissions for the ones I've done, but just filling in a few blanks of like, hey, I'm going to present on XYZ, it's going to be good. That just doesn't suffice, because some of these folks are putting together proposals that are just mind blowing and really, really good. So take the same amount of time, I think, to submit as we're going to take to review, and you're going to have a much better chance of getting your talk accepted.
Olivia, did you want to say something?
Yeah, so the thing is, we cover a lot of things here. So the part that I want to highlight here on being on the program committee. So one of the things that I really enjoy is that, as Sarah mentioned, is that you have the ability to see what people want to talk about, and so you can also have some ideas. Okay, people in that specific area are very passionate by a new technology or want to talk a lot for an older technology, whatever it is. So I find it very interesting. It obviously takes time to do those reviews, because sometimes you have like 70, 80 talk proposal to review, and it's tricky to be fair, because as you mentioned, like when you start reviewing, you have a lot of time, you review 1 talk, 2 talk, but when you reviewed 80 presentation, it becomes like difficult to stay like very neutral with all of them. And so the more information we have when we do those reviews, the better it is, because then, I mean, in the end, it allows us to make better decisions, but in the end, it's always difficult to be very fair with all the people submitting talk proposals, because we are all human. Sometimes we take a weekend, sometimes we take 1 week, and it's an interesting task, but it's not always easy to do.
I think that's why there's a committee as well, because everyone then has different preferences or experiences, and then you get to talk about them again. And oftentimes people change their minds. And to Sarah's point, a lot of people are using AI to submit their talks, and that's just, they all look the same. So it's hard to choose your talk if you don't put in the editing work.
I think that's a super good point. When I first started submitting for conferences, I wouldn't fill out the entire, I'm like, oh, who cares about benefits to the ecosystem? Or like, didn't you get that from like the abstract like itself? Like, can't you tell what the, and then I quickly realized by not getting accepted, that I wasn't as a potential speaker putting in the work when I started reviewing abstracts, to your point, Sarah, that people are putting in. And if you don't fill out every single thing and your abstract is very similar to somebody else's, but that other person put in all the other work, well, they're going to get a better score than you because you can tell as a reviewer that they're all in. And I think like that is crucial, is to your point, Roxanne, like if you're going to use ChatGPT or some AI tool to help you get started, the word is help. Like help you get started, because when you're reviewing abstract after abstract and you're noticing the same phrases and the same, like you know that someone did not take the time to enhance what the tool gave them. And I know that for non-native English speakers, ChatGPT can seem like a great way for you to enhance what you're writing, but I would prefer to see, incorrect grammar versus an auto-generated tool that's using the same quote big words or, buzzword bingo in the abstract that ends up being total fluff than what you could have done on your own. So I think, as a reviewer, I find that to be the most frustrating is like there's a conference that a friend of mine was reviewing and they have a checkbox that says I used AI to help me generate my abstract. And so that way it's just clear, like everybody knows straight off the bat, like that you did that. And I think that that's helpful, because like tech is a big, expansive space, but when you look at conferences, there's usually the same sort of content tracks that are happening. So if like somebody spits out an abstract in ChatGPT, like they're just going to be the same over and
Right.
over.
We want to see who you are and why you're excited, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And I think that as that use, I mean, as AI use kind of continues to grow in multiple ways, I think it's important to, for me at least, I've evolved a little bit of my view on like AI submitted talk abstract kind of things, to be more, you still can notice them, and if it looks like it was completely put there and not edited, to to hopefully add a little bit of their kind of personality to it, I'm not going to be as forgiving. But also, a friend of mine that runs a big dev conference, community dev conference, mentioned that when they're getting like 200 speaker, 180 type of speakers that they need to select, they're less concerned with it being an AI generated proposal, and because it comes down to them, the person that's submitting it, they actually have to give the talk. So if the talk doesn't go well, they're not going to speak at that conference again, which is great for a large conference. But for a smaller, community conference where there's maybe only going to be 20 speakers, you have to be a little bit more selective. And so it does kind of come back to, I think the way that Sarah said it earlier of go and read everything. Read all the talks. Get a feel for what's been submitted when you're starting to kind of help the rest of your team understand how to review these talks and get to something that uh, you know fits the conference.
And yeah, on that one, to better understand how to identify talks that fit the content is by looking at the schedule from the previous years or by watching videos from the previous years, because I think sometimes some conferences are more like sales oriented. Sometimes you want to have very deep technical content. Sometimes you know that you will have like people very specific to a specific ecosystem. So you always need to try to understand what should be, I mean, how deep you're supposed to go.
And I think that leads to a good point is the like a sponsored talk, like a vendor talk versus a general talk. And since we're all in the open source space, I always found it curious before I got really involved in open source was how can you do a vendor neutral talk when you're a vendor? Like how do you frame that, right? And then the more I got involved in open source, I realized, oh, like you show comparisons and it's not a sales pitch. And, like how, like, do you find sponsored talks necessary in an overall conference plan? That's a good question. I'm gonna throw it out there.
I can start. I think coming from the consulting side, I think there's value in both because customers need to know their options, right? And so typically, like when we're presenting options, we'll give them the commercial and the open source option, and it depends on the company which choice they're going to go with. If you are working with a company that doesn't have a strong open source culture, it's a great opportunity when someone's talking about a commercial solution to help them understand the open source solution, right? And they may not choose it, but I think part of our job and as Modus, we're very invested in open source. We have to support commercial as well, but you have to be able to explain to people the value and why you would use open source, but you also have to explain the risk and the non-risk, because when people hear open, if you're talking to executives, it's like no. And that's not how this operates, right? We all know that, but a lot of people don't. And I think when you're able to go, everyone knows these commercial tools, when you can go have a very educated deep dive conversation, which isn't me, I'm not technical enough, but I can bring in team members to say, yeah, but if you're comparing the two, like we have to be able to compare apples to apples here again, since I'm on a fruit theme today, and be able to explain if there's actual risk, because if there's too much risk in either option, the company is not going to go for it. And I think a lot of times people are more familiar with the names they know, but our job is to explain the names they don't know in comparison, and they're not always going to win, and that's okay. Like that's what's awesome about having open source and commercial options is there's always a right solution for people. And we obviously would prefer open source, but if that's not right for the company, you do what's right for the company.
Yeah, I think I've worked at vendors. I can't think of the last time I gave a vendor talk. I always tried to make it a talk that was going to talk about the practice, the principle. What is the important thing that is there that applies to what my company does, but that is applicable to the vendors or to the people that are there, and it kind of touches on like the comparisons too, but it's more the what are people going to walk away with? So I think it's important to have both like the vendory talks, but it also depends on the conference. Again, a small conference, there's less room for the vendor talks. You really want to have like more community driven, more here's what I learned, more practical, hands-on type of things. But a large conference like an open source summit or a KubeCon or even to some extent cdCon is that there's the opportunity to have a vendor talk about what they're doing and how it relates to the ecosystem. And still people know, and it says what company you're from. People know that, but a vendor can do a talk that still is about their product, but that doesn't have to be a sales pitch. And I think that's one thing I think people miss when it comes to like vendor talks. It doesn't have to be a sales pitch. You can do a vendor talk and it be valuable to the ecosystem. And I think that's if you can find talks like that, then I think it's good to have those as part of your program.
And most of the vendors use open source or do open source anyway. So yeah, everyone's open in the way.
Yeah, on the vendor talk topic, the thing is, as I said, it depends on the conferences. So some conferences don't like to have vendor talk. Like for example, you think about FOSDEM, vendor talk, we just like it's not a place to go. I think it also depends how the conference is organized. If it accept money, if it need to pay, for example, for a room, for example, because somehow. I mean, if you have everything for free, that's nice, but that it's not always possible. And sometimes you need to get money in one way or the others. And for companies to sponsor an event, they also need to find some benefit out of it. So sometimes vendor talks are important. And as you said, Jeremy, sometimes it can also be useful depending how you shape and how you do your presentation, because you can always get value out of them as well by learning something else, something like on an open source project, whatever. So you can come with good practices, you can share what you learn from, I mean, from your point of a company point of view. So I think it really depends on the conference. And but yeah, I think we all agree that the sales speech is not very interesting, because we understand when we just have bullshit presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think we've touched on like what it's like to review abstracts, what it's like to maybe submit vendor versus non. But one of the things that I really value about tech, which I don't think that you see in maybe other sort of industry focused conferences, is the push for, and I hate this phrase, like the soft skills, but also like a push for talks that are more about, like, I give one on networking. Jeremy, I know you give one on ADHD, but like more about like the work-life balance of the situation. And how do you feel like, I think mental health is something that I think this industry has embraced as a challenge that we're all sort of facing, and how do we overcome it, which is huge. When I told someone that they were blown, like they were like, "Are you kidding me?" I'm like, "No, like we talk about it because burnout is real. Like tech is intense. All the shift, all the focus, all the innovation." So how do you feel about like those kinds of talks being added into an overall conference program? Just opening it up.
I can go. We had a burnout talk a few times, as you said, and it was a great hit. Everyone felt seen. We even had stickers that had like how you felt, and then everyone could talk and share their stories, and that's just a nice feeling because you feel less alone, especially if you work from home. And then your boss can see that it's a problem and maybe will understand it better. And yeah, I think it's important.
What I saw what I saw in the past, they are often very well received by the audience. You always see a lot of people attending. I think if all the presentation are about burnout, maybe we need to change the name of the conference. But usually, yeah.
I used to have the domain name burnedout.dev. And then I never could figure out what to do with it, and I might have let it expire, and now I'm like, oh no, I really should have, because that would have been, Olivier, we should do a conference. Anyways, yeah, Sarah, you were about ready to say something.
No, I think it's important to have a variety of topics. I mean, like I was saying, conferences are exhausting and you burn out half the time at the conference. I think it's really important to have a balanced lineup across, I mean, whether it be mental health, whether it be more on just things to help people be, more human topics along with technical topics. I think the things that AI are going to really allow a lot of people to do is the technical side. AI is not going to help you understand a lot of the other side, I feel like, and that's the opportunity that we have. And one guy on our team he does something really cool on every conference we go to, and we're not going to host and be the team at every conference, but he creates a running group, for instance. So every morning he's like, okay, everybody, we're going to do the running group, gets the photos and puts it out to everyone. And we could get this group of people, anywhere from 10 to 30 people that all go running together every morning. I'm not yet one of them. I'm trying to get back into running. But I mean, that's something very small. You can do at a conference as big as cubecon to put out in the ecosystem of something that's stepping away from the day to day, meeting people, giving an opportunity, you know, to find the people to have lunch with and create relationships that can also, you know, add to the mental health side of just having the talk track. If your talk doesn't get accepted, what can you put together? Can you do a yoga session? Can you do a meet and greet? Something to add the human aspect back at these conferences that quickly become overwhelming.
Yeah, I will say that I gave a talk at FOSDEM and it's called, I think, the 6 Degrees of Separation Open Source Edition. But it's all about how you can network. But the one thing that I find that resonates with people is that it's like 5 different ways to network in your comfort zone. Because there's no right or wrong way to network, but it's like, how comfortable are you? And I think the response I get from the audience, because when you open it up for questions and you start throwing out examples and you put yourself on the spot and you just show how like your own vulnerabilities and how like you've tried things and failed, you know, but like it's okay to try again. I think that when you're, and I'm not a technical person, so it's always really nerve-wracking to be in front of a technical audience to know if you're going to win or lose or just like, are you going to make it through? But I think to Sarah's point, it really humanizes everybody in the room. And I think too often maybe we get stuck behind our keyboards and our Zoom calls or Meet or whatever you use. And you forget that everyone has something else going on. And just because you see me from the neck up and I look like I'm getting all my stuff together doesn't mean that I am falling down in other areas. Or just because you see me on a Zoom call doesn't mean I'm going to go up to you at a conference, because I absolutely am afraid of talking to people in person. So I think anytime you can help equip people at conferences or anywhere with just sort of just those humanizing skill sets, or letting them know that it's okay. Like if you're not someone that wants to approach someone, but you're more happy behind a keyboard, that's okay too. So to your point, Roxanne, humanizing, letting everybody know that they're in this together in whatever way, I think is really cool. And I don't know if other industries do it as well as the tech industry, but I will say like over the last, I've been in tech for 15 years, to see this come through and not go away, but just get stronger, have better talks, look at keynotes that are like focused on this, I think is what makes tech really like the innovative place that it is, not just behind a keyboard, but you know, in person.
What you made me think of is when I came into tech, as you said, it's scary, right? But over the years, I realized everyone's the same. Doesn't matter your title, doesn't matter how long you've been there. You don't have to be afraid, you know, you can talk to anyone and they're all welcoming. And if they're not, well, that's not about you.
And they're probably not open source, because open source
Yeah, they're
people
probably
are
not
bad.
open source.
I think it's also interesting that I think Roxanne and Laura, you both said, and I said as well, like we're not the technical people though. And so like I think that's okay as well. That's what's cool about the tech community is I consider myself somebody in tech, and I know you both do as well, but we're not the folks that are going to be, you know, writing lines of code necessarily. But it's like I love this community because you don't have to be. Like you can come in and be part of a tech community and have never written code. And I know Roxanne, when I first joined this group, I'm like, but I'm not, like, I've never done this. And you're like, it's fine. Like we need people, we need evangelists in this group that aren't just engineers and developers. Like it goes end to end. Like you can be in HR and be in a tech company and you're going to see a different side of how technology works that is really, really critical and important to an open source culture, I think. And I think that the more people understand that this is this group in specifically, but also tech in general, is a very welcoming committee and is open to these kinds of conversations. And I know, you know, specifically as a woman that's not technical in tech, it's like everyone's like, wait, how do you do that? And it's like, well, you have to figure out, like you said, Lori, where you're comfortable stepping out of your comfort zone. And it's not going to be the same for all of us. But if you can be a voice somewhere, it really does matter, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to add on this is that open source communities exist because some people contribute to something, and it doesn't matter what you contribute to. Some people like to write, let's say, documentation, organizing events, writing codes. You have a lot of things to do in communities. And when you go to conferences, you know that the people who go there are also interested to connect somehow, even if they are afraid to talk to new people. But if they just want to see the content of the presentation, most of the time it's available on YouTube. So most of the people who attend conferences, they are often welcoming and they just enjoy being there and meeting new people. So
Yeah, and I would add one piece, especially, we talked about like how open source conferences generally kind of that is about the meeting people. Like it's supposed to be very open. It's kind of in the name. But the which I'd say that kind of tongue in cheek because not all open source conferences are. Oh, anyways, but
He doesn't mean
there's other.
cdCon. cdCon's
Right.
open.
No. cdCon is actually one of the more welcoming conferences. And I'm not saying that because I'm on this here. It is. It's one of the more welcoming conferences that I've been to over the years. Um, was that a good enough plug?
Yep,
Was that
perfect.
okay, good.
You'll receive your
Checks in the
payment.
mail.
Yes. All right, cool. But the thing that I really like with these type of conferences as well is those kind of birds of a feather kind of conversations. Is if you see a talk uh, and you want to talk more about it, there's some have open space. Some conferences have open spaces where you can just propose an idea. Others have birds of a feather where you may have submitted the talk, or submitted the idea, but it's more about like, hey, here's something I want to talk about, and then getting others, and just say, hey, I'm going to go sit at this table, have a section set, and then whoever wants to come talk about this, let's talk. And if you see something, I think it's a great way to kind of see if your idea for a talk that you want to submit uh, for some conference, if it resonates. That's one way. Another way to just kind of make it a little bit more personal than standing up in front of people is like, let's have more of a conversation. I think those are great ways to kind of take your experience to the next level and 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 bring in more or at least just grab more value out of the conference is with those kind of birds of a feather open space kind of things. And then you can see maybe it is something that you want to give a talk yourself.
I will say, like, one of the things that when I left grad school and I moved where I moved, I realized I missed like, the ability to have those conversations. And I think, Jeremy, what you just pointed out is stellar, is like, think about the people you work with and you have sort of the same sort of conversations every day. You're, going through kind of what you do, like, not mundanely, but, like, it's like, how are the kids? How are this? Like, what are we working on today? But when you get in this setting, you can kind of, especially these birds of a feathers, you can dive deep and get so geeky and so nerd out with people that are just nerding out with you. And then you realize you really build those relationships and those foundations, and then it carries you on, right? And I think, again, the hidden benefit of conferences is networking because you're going to meet so many people. And in this day and age, the more people you meet, the more connections you have, the better, because we all know that the job environment is crazy and like you never know who's going to like spark an interest and all of that kind of stuff. But I think like those are the conversations that really help you develop those bonds and those relationships and those friendships that go outside of the conferences, that when you go to that conference the next year, you feel like it's a reunion because you're seeing your people in person again. And even though like FOSDEM is crazy, it's amazing. KubeCon is crazy, cdCon is crazy. You have those little like moments where you're running across the hall and you see somebody that you saw last year and you're like, hey, and you like try to hook up for lunch. And I think like those are those hidden benefits that, maybe it doesn't look good on paper when you're trying to sell your boss to go, but for personal value, it's huge.
I think
As you
also,
said, it carries you. Yeah. Go ahead, Sarah.
I was gonna say, like, the first time you go to some of these, and there's usually events or happy hours in the evening, that's also a very easy segue in where people usually aren't hounding you, right? Like most times it's not you go into a happy hour and people are like, what do you do? We want to sell you something. You can kind of like do the whole, walk around the thing if you know, grab a drink if you want, grab food if you want, but you can kind of do that lap without anyone noticing. And I think that's a really good way to start understanding like, I need to become a little more comfortable. I'll do a lap. And then maybe you're like, actually, this isn't bad. I'll do another lap. And like you start building up. And that's a lot of the way that I ended up when I was much, you know, more nervous about doing the networking. I would go do that because you meet people outside of the conference setting and everyone has had a long day and they're a little, it's more of a like a, hey, what do you do? And then it kind of gets, it's not really work, right? You can kind of take that work hat off. And for me, that's a nice wind down and you meet people like in more of a real setting than maybe even in the hallway. And then that's exactly right. You know, connect with people on LinkedIn or be like, okay, like what conference talks are you going to? And you'll see them again that week. But if you do that with one or two people and you start attending a lot of these events, you start to realize you're building this network that didn't really require networking per se, right? It just was going and grabbing a bite of food at the end of the night or the end of the conference and you met somebody. And it's much easier. I think it's still after 10 years of, you know, 15 conferences a year, it's still easier for me to do that than to go up and be like, hi, you know, I'm Sarah, let's chat. I'm very uncomfortable with that approach.
Yeah, and I would 100%. As extroverted as I am, I'm not one that just goes up and said that same like, "Hey, I'm Jeremy," unless I'm at a booth, and then it's like, okay, yeah, you have to. But it's in the normal. I'm just not. Yes, I'm extroverted, um, but I don't generally do that, and so you know, forming those connections and speaking like from a heavy personal side, um, I went without a job for a year, even though I was, you know, doing a little side projects here and there. I was without a job for a year, and that's a job in and of itself, trying to find a job. And the and yet I was at a lot of conferences during that time, partly because I was speaking at a lot of conferences, but there were some that I just said I'm just going to go to, and that and Lori knows this, like that helped sustain me during that time because I had formed those connections over the years and that community that helped provide a lot of um, the emotional support that I needed. And the sometimes just the, you know what, I don't want to think about anything else right now. I'm going to just think about these friends that I'm with. And it was, you know, because of those friendships and the things that formed. And so it's, you know, that is another great thing about conferences for me.
And I'm going to echo what Jeremy said. I was out of work for 7 months and I made a budget to go to conferences. I had like put money aside because quite honestly, I think the open source community is what, to Jeremy's point, kept me going, like being involved. And I wasn't looking for anyone to give me a referral. I was just looking for someone to give me something to do. And to Olivier's point, like you can contribute at any kind of level, like whatever you can do. And it just made the job search less stressful because at least I had something to look forward to that wasn't, you know, dependent on what does my resume currently say, you know? So I think that's also just like to Jeremy's point, like a hidden benefit of conferences is just being able to breathe. And Orlin at Cloud Native Rejects said it best. He grabbed his name badge and he said, "Do you see this? This is just a name badge. It's just your name. Nobody cares where you work. They only care that you're here and that you want to learn." And I was like mind blown, right? Because I think, you know, in the US, however many hundreds of thousands of people got laid off in tech and it's still happening, that is a prideful thing, an ego thing. But just to like have him hold his name badge up and say it's just about you and being here, I mean, it just what a great way to cap that, you know, event. Okay, so we are
Olivier
hitting.
has something, I think.
Yeah,
Go. Sorry.
I just wanted to add on the networking aspect is that the longer you attend the same conference and easier it become because the first year you will meet one or two people and then the year after those two people will introduce you to other people and so on. And so if you attend the same conference for multiple years, you just create a lot of friends and it's really nice.
And get to know the registration person. She knows everybody and she'll remember and introduce you. That's why we're there.
Yep.
Okay, so sorry to cut you off, but So let's do one last final thought. Like cdCon is coming up. Of course, we want everyone to register for that. It is in Denver, June 23rd through the 25th. Check out cd.foundation's website and you can find all of the information to get you to the conference. But final thoughts, starting with you, Roxanne.
Skip.
Jeremy.
Final thoughts. I'm really looking forward to the, meeting everybody. Those that I haven't met before, definitely find me out. I'll be at the cdCon, and also, meeting and seeing those that again, like I said before, that I've met and made friends with over the years. So, really I think make those connections and come find me at cdCon.
Sarah.
I think to not just say exactly what Jeremy just said, since he kind of nailed it. I think the other thing is if you're interested in attending, start following this group here along with like the foundation, cdCon on social media. It's a great way of seeing what's going on and what's going to be happening. And I think one thing I love about this group and, like we were saying, tech in general is no one here is going to decline a LinkedIn request from anyone. So if you have questions, reach out. I mean, we're all, I think, an open book on helping, but that is step one of understanding if cdCon's right for you. It should be. We want it to be right for you, but reach out, look at everything, understand what's happening, and understand the value. And what Jeremy said earlier, the value you can take back to your company too, or the value for you from a networking perspective. There's a ton of value to be had. Hashtag value.
Olivier.
So yeah, on my side, I just want to finish this with conferences are really a great way to learn new thing, to explore new opportunities, new projects, getting new ideas. And usually you need to prepare the conference before. So as Sarah mentioned, like reaching out on LinkedIn, for example, trying to understand who are the people behind the conference. Yeah, just asking questions before. That's always a good way to prepare your travel very well.
That's a good point. Asking questions. I'm always there. If you don't know how to submit a talk or what you should say, you can reach out to us. We're there to help you. You don't have to go in blindly, yeah.
And for me, I would just say that going to a conference is an investment in yourself as much as it's an investment for your company. And I think don't ever like let that idea get in the way. Like you are valuable and your thoughts are as valuable as the person on stage. And who knows where you're going to get your inspiration from. And maybe you'll submit a talk the next round, because you've been, like a light bulb moment and you're like, oh, I have a case study to go that would pair really well with what I just heard. And wouldn't this be great if everybody could learn from me? So, take those times to invest in yourself. And I want to thank everybody that joined us today, Olivier, Sarah, Jeremy, and Roxanne. The CD Foundation is a wealth of information on continuous delivery, continuous integration. So check out the website cd.foundation. To Sarah's point, we have a Slack channel if you want to join the Slack channel and you can start asking questions. There's tons of channels within it. You can go to the website to see the list of meetings and all that kind of stuff. So feel free to ping any of us, but I think the key is we're here for you. So don't miss the opportunity to connect with people in your industry, including us. And we're so happy to be able to bring you the CD Pipeline and cdCon this June. So from me, from everybody, thank you and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks.
Thank you.